What up, this is Patrick Hayes, welcome to my YouTube channel. And in this video, I'm going to share with you a mental Kung Fu lesson. So check this out. If I was holding, imagine this was a really strong rope and it wouldn't break it if you tried to push it against me. If I was holding this like this, a martial arts master taught me this. I'm holding it like this, and you were pushing against the center of this towards me. There's two different ways that I can, say, neutralize your momentum towards me. One is by getting in conflict with you and fighting against your momentum. So you're pushing this and I'm pushing this way on the other two sides of it, and we're going back and forth, pushing against each other. Or I could pull it sideways like this. So I'm not in conflict with you in the same way, but I'm neutralizing it nonetheless by pulling it sideways. And the metaphor here that I want to bring across to you can be used in just about any different situation where you find yourself in potential conflict with something. So if you have a problem or an issue. And the power of this understanding is that when you go into conflict with something, you actually are going into resonance with that conflict rather than neutralizing something indirectly. So the key here is in understanding that if you want to overcome some sort of issue or problem, that when you recognize it as a problem and you go into conflict with it and try to stamp that problem out, actually what you resist persists. You've heard this before, right? Because what you're doing is you're harmonizing with whatever it is as a problem, as an issue. And by doing that, you perpetuate the problem and you turn it into a battle, you against the problem. Now, it might work in the sense that you might move all the issue out of the way and solve the problem. But the problem with doing it that way is that you're harmonizing with the problem, and then you're spending a lot of time in that vibration, and from that vibration you're seeding new problems of the same vibration to come and experience in the future. So if you've ever had the experience where you tried to fix your car maybe like in a really angry space, and then you did fix it temporarily, but what you found is that because you did it from this kind of like conflict vibration, that you ended up creating another problem in the car that ended up blowing up in your face at a later date, right? So very oftentimes when we go about trying to solve a problem from a vibration of conflict, we end up creating more problems. So the idea is, instead of directly focusing on something as a problem, we can oftentimes solve problems or neutralize problems by solving them indirectly. Instead of focusing directly on it, solving it indirectly. Now, of course, there are certain things that come up that need our time and energy right in that moment, right? And I'm not saying this as an excuse to avoid taking care of the issues in your life. Like, oh, we'll just focus on something else. But what I'm explaining this as is a technique for you not to get stuck in the vibration of conflict when you're trying to resolve something in your life, but actually come into a vibration of, ideally, celebration, right? Now, in the beginning stages, it's really hard for us to run into some sort of issue or problem in our life and then celebrate that. Because naturally, the reason why we would identify it as a problem is because it's something that we don't want. And so when it comes up, we have an emotional, like kind of triggered response to it. It's like, oh no, what are we gonna do, right? So oftentimes in the beginning, as we're learning how to trust the universe, we're learning how to trust that all of these issues that show up are actually blessings in disguise and they're here to teach us something. As we're learning that, oftentimes it can be really helpful. And when something comes up that is an issue, that we actually don't focus directly on it because our identification of it is it's a problem, but actually that we keep it in our peripheral consciousness and we focus on something that raises our vibration. Now, we keep the intention to solve the problem. We keep the intention to neutralize whatever this thing is. But the idea is we bring our vibration into a space that is out of conflict. Because by doing that, what we're doing is we're opening ourselves up to higher vibrational solutionary energies. When we're in the vibration of conflict with something, we are oftentimes cutting ourselves off from the potential solutions because a solution does not exist within the vibration of the conflict. A solution exists within the vibration of the solution, right? And so being in a celebratory kind of like high vibe state oftentimes raises our vibration enough to then have access to the solution. And you'll be surprised at how well your subconscious mind can draw down a solution to a problem when you're not stuck in the conflict of the problem. So one of the practices that I'm talking about here is when we find some sort of issue that shows up in our life, instead of attaching to it as an issue and then trying to stomp it out really crazy because we got to get rid of this thing. Instead of doing that, training ourselves to see the issue, recognize it, acknowledge it, don't act like it doesn't exist, acknowledge it, but then say, okay, now is a good time for me to go clear my mind and get into a bright space, right? So whether this means go on a walk, go out into the forest, watch the sunset, maybe go exercise, do some sort of thing that gets us moving, and hold the intention of drawing down a solution to the problem. Because what you'll find is that oftentimes, if you have some sort of issue and you get emotional about it and you try to stomp it out, if you try to fix the problem at that point, you do it from the wrong energy space, right? I've had many experiences in my life when I've been upset or triggered at somebody, and then I tried to address it right in that moment, and it came out the wrong way, and I ended up creating more trouble than I needed to create for myself because I didn't know how to let it go, relax, get into a bright space, and then let the solution come to me. And oftentimes, when I do this, I step away from it, and maybe it's 45 minutes, maybe it's even a day, depending on what's going on. What happens is that the reality of the situation kind of like sets in, and I start to see it more clearly for what it is, and I am in a vibration where I'm prepared to draw a solution down because I'm not so in resistance to what's happening, and I draw the solution down, and actually it's much more smooth than I thought it was going to be, because what I realized is my reaction to it was actually different fears or different resistances that were exaggerating what it was in the first place. So it wasn't even that big of a deal, but I made it a bigger deal. Now, ideally, what we're going for here is getting into the kind of relationship with life that we trust life. We trust the different things that come into our reality as blessings. And oftentimes they might come as blessings in disguise. But we have a trust that life works out for us. And therefore, when an issue or a problem arises, in the moment of its arising, we can see it as a potential blessing or potential opportunity. And this is ideally what we're working for. Now, it's hard at first to be able to do that until we've gone through the experience of neutralizing many different things and then coming to realize that actually this was not some like terrible thing. It was an opportunity for me to be more flexible, for me to grow in some way, for me to see another dimension of life that I was cut off to. There's all these different things that come from the circumstances in our reality that might seem uncomfortable or unwanted at the time that they show up. And the more that we kind of can reflect on that and can know that that's the way that life operates, then the more likely it is that in the moment that a problem comes up, that we don't flip out about it and we can actually see it for what it is and then be open for the blessings that it has for us. And a lot of really great inventors and problem solvers throughout history have used this kind of approach where they're working on a particular equation or something. They'll get themselves into working on it and then consciously leave it alone and let their subconscious work on it for them, right? So this is the idea of like you set an intention to figure something out and then you let your subconscious do it instead of trying to figure it out with your mind. See, but when you're really afraid of something happening or you're really resisting something, it can captivate your consciousness to the point where you're not willing to let it like move into your subconscious and work itself out with, you say, your higher mind, because it's such a big deal. You're giving too much importance to it. And you're afraid for some reason. You make it such a big deal that you try to figure it all out right now, and that actually ends up creating more problems than it would have otherwise. So in the beginning, it can be really helpful to just learn how to, when you acknowledge something coming up, being able to keep it in your periphery and not focus too much on it, not enter into the vibration of conflict with it. Then after that, after a certain period of time, you can actually start developing the capacity to be able to, when you see something come up, identify it as an opportunity as opposed to a problem, so you don't even enter into a kind of conflict vibration with it. And when you do that, then you're actually able to start dancing in the moment with issues that come up, and then you'll find that you are much better at being able to solve things in a graceful way, and you don't need to take as much time off to kind of like recenter or rebalance yourself. So thanks so much for tuning in. This is Patrick Hayes. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. If this video was useful for you or you think it might be useful to somebody else you know, please share it with them. I would really appreciate that. And if you haven't already downloaded, I have a 3 Keys of Happiness video that I made. It's down here in the video description, and you can go ahead and download that, and there's some really powerful fundamental keys for being able to stabilize happiness in your life. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time. One love.